Every breath felt like swallowing crushed glass as Chloe finally located her phone in the dark. Her blood was already washing into the storm drain beneath the freezing Chicago rain, and her left arm hung at an impossible, sickening angle, the bone pressing dangerously against bruised skin. Knowing Brad would send creditors after her little sister if she involved the police, she bypassed 911 with trembling, blood-slicked fingers. Instead, she dialed the sole number saved from a sleek, matte black business card. It rang exactly twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered, the sound of a crowded room instantly falling silent in the background. "Speak." Vision blackening at the edges, Chloe choked on a sob. "Roman! It's Chloe! Can you pick me up?" O'Rourke's diner was a grease-stained beacon of neon on the edge of the south side, the kind of place that smelled permanently of scorched coffee and vanilla bleach. It wasn't glamorous, but at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, it was her entire world. Chloe Bennett was 24, drowning in nursing school debt and recovering from the financial ruin left behind by her ex-boyfriend, Brad Jenkins. Working the graveyard shift was the only way to keep the lights on in her cramped studio apartment. The bell above the door chimed, cutting through the low hum of the refrigerators. She didn't need to look up from wiping down the Formica counter to know who had just walked in. The atmosphere in the diner always shifted the second he crossed the threshold. The air grew heavier. The 2 truckers in the corner booth suddenly found their hash browns fascinating, and the late-night quiet turned into a breathless hush. Roman Russo. He slid into the corner booth, his booth, facing the door. He was a man carved from marble and sharp angles, dressed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than her car. He never came in with a large entourage, just one man, Tommy, who stood outside under the flickering street lamp, smoking in the rain. Most people whispered that Roman was a real estate mogul with his hands in the city's shipping ports. The smarter ones kept their mouths shut, knowing the Russo family didn't just move cargo, they moved the city itself. She picked up the glass carafe and a heavy ceramic mug, walking over to him. "Evening, Mr. Russo," she said, keeping her voice even. She was terrified of him the first time he came in 3 months ago, but somehow, over dozens of late-night black coffees and slices of cherry pie, a strange, quiet truce had formed between them. "Chloe," he replied. His voice was a low rumble, dark and smooth. His dark eyes flicked up, locking onto hers. He didn't look at her the way other men in the diner did, hungry and crude. He looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You look exhausted. You're pulling a double again." It wasn't a question. Nothing with Roman ever was. "Rent is due on Friday, and my landlord doesn't take I owe us," she said, pouring the steaming coffee. She tried to hide the slight tremor in her hand, but nothing escaped him. He reached out, his large, scarred fingers wrapping lightly around her wrist to steady the pot. The heat radiating off his skin was a sharp contrast to the damp chill of the diner. "There are easier ways to make rent." "Not legal ones," she countered, pulling her hand back gently. "And I like my nursing license where it is, thanks. Cherry pie tonight?" A ghost of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Just the coffee. Sit down for a minute." "I'm on the clock, Roman." "Sarah is in the back doing inventory, and those 2 truckers are too terrified to report you for slacking," he said calmly, leaning back against the red vinyl. "Sit." She hesitated, then slid into the booth opposite him. Her feet were throbbing, and taking the weight off them was a luxury. They sat in silence for a moment. He took a sip of the black coffee, his eyes never leaving her face. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the slight fraying at the collar of her uniform. "You've been looking over your shoulder all week," Roman stated quietly. and you flinched when the door chimed. Who are you looking for? Her breath hitched. Brad. Brad had been texting her non-stop for 3 days. He was in deep with a local crew of bookies, the O'Connors, bad news from the West Side, and he was convinced she was hiding a secret stash of money from their time together. She wasn't. She had nothing left, because he had drained it all. Just jumpy, she lied, forcing a smile. Too much caffeine. Roman's jaw ticked. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a heavy, matte black card. He slid it across the table until it touched her fingertips. There was no company name on it, just a phone number embossed in silver. I don't like liars, Chloe, he murmured, his tone softening just a fraction, a dangerous kind of gentle. Keep it. If the shadows you're looking for get too close, call. She stared at the card. I don't need charity, Mr. Russo. It's not charity, it's an insurance policy. He stood up, dropping a crisp $100 bill on the table for a $2 coffee. Go home, Chloe. Lock your doors. As he walked out, the diner seemed to exhale. She slipped the heavy card into the pocket of her apron, unaware that in less than 24 hours, that piece of cardboard would be the only thing keeping her alive. The following night, the Chicago weather decided to unleash a torrential downpour. By the time her shift ended at 3 a.m., the streets were completely flooded, reflecting the sickly yellow light of the street lamps. Sarah, the night manager, waved her off from the register. Get home safe, sweetie. Don't let the puddles swallow you, she called out. See you tomorrow, Sarah, she yelled back, pulling her thin trench coat tight around her shoulders. She pushed through the heavy glass doors and immediately ducked her head against the driving rain. Her 2008 Honda Civic was parked in the back alley, a dark, narrow strip wedged between the diner and a closed-down laundromat. The single security light above the back door had burned out 2 days ago, plunging the alley into pitch blackness. She hurried toward the silhouette of her car, fishing her keys out of her bag. The rain was deafening, masking any sound. She reached the driver's side door, slotted the key in and turned it. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind, violently jerking her backward. She screamed, but the sound was muffled against a calloused, damp palm. The smell of cheap whiskey, stale cigarette smoke, and nervous sweat flooded her senses. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her chest. Shut up, Chloe, or I swear to God I'll knock you out right here," a frantic, slurred voice hissed in her ear. Brad. He spun her around, slamming her back against the wet metal of her car. He looked terrible. His blonde hair was matted to his forehead, his face pale and bruised, and his eyes were completely wild, dilated with fear and whatever he had taken to stay awake. "Brad, let me go!" she shrieked, shoving hard against his chest. He stumbled back a step, slipping slightly on the wet pavement, but quickly lunged forward, pinning her shoulders. "I need the money, Chloe. I know you have it. You've been stashing tips, you're going to school. You have to have something," he begged, his voice cracking. "The O'Connors, Chloe. They found me. They said if I don't have 20 grand by tomorrow morning, they're going to take my fingers. Then they're coming to your sister's dorm." Her blood ran cold at the mention of Lily. "I don't have 20 grand. I don't even have $200, Brad. You took everything when you left. You maxed out my credit cards. Leave Lily out of this." "Don't lie to me, you stupid bitch," he roared, spit flying from his lips. He grabbed her purse, ripping the strap off her shoulder. He frantically dumped the contents onto the wet asphalt. Makeup, pens, loose change, and her nursing textbooks scattered into the puddles. He dropped to his knees, clawing through the mess. "There's nothing there," she yelled, stepping forward to grab her ruined books. "You're holding out on me!" Brad sprang up, grabbing her left arm. His grip was like a vice, his fingers digging brutally into her bicep. "Brad, you're hurting me! Let go!" She kicked at his shins, panic overriding reason. She needed to get in the car. She needed to lock the doors. "Give me the money!" He yanked her forward, twisting her arm behind her back to subdue her. She fought back, twisting her body violently to the right to break his grip. In his drug-addled desperation, Brad didn't let go. Instead, he yanked upward and twisted against the momentum of her body. There was a sound, a sickening, wet crack that echoed off the brick walls of the alley, louder than the rain. For a split second, there was no pain, only a vibrating shock that traveled up to her neck. Then, the agony hit. It was a blinding, white-hot explosion of sheer torture. She collapsed to her knees, a guttural, primal scream tearing from her throat. Her left arm hung uselessly, bending at an angle halfway between her wrist and elbow that defied human anatomy. "Oh God! Oh God!" Brad stammered, backing away, his hands raised as if she were the one attacking him. He stared at the mangled shape of her arm in horror. "You broke it! You broke my arm!" she sobbed, clutching her shoulder, unable to even touch the shattered radius bone. The pain was making her nauseous, the world spinning in nauseating circles. Brad looked around wildly. You tripped! You fell! Don't you dare call the cops, Chloe! If the cops come, the O'Connors will see it on the scanner. They'll go straight for Lily. I mean it! Keep your mouth shut!" Without another word, he turned and sprinted down the alley, disappearing into the dark, rainy Chicago night, leaving her completely alone on the freezing pavement. She didn't know how long she lay there in the puddle. 10 seconds. 2 minutes. The rain beat down relentlessly, soaking through her clothes, chilling her to the bone. But all she could feel was the raging inferno in her arm. She tried to stand, but the pain caused her vision to grey out, and she slumped back against the tire of her car, gasping for air. She needed a hospital. She needed an ambulance. She dragged her right hand through the puddle where Brad had dumped her purse. Her fingers brushed against the cracked screen of her phone. Miraculously, it lit up. She stared at the emergency keypad. 911. Her thumb hovered over the glass, but Brad's frantic voice echoed in her head. "They'll go straight for Lily. The O'Connors weren't petty street thugs. They were deeply rooted in the West Side rackets. Everyone knew they had informants in the local precincts. If she filed a police report against Brad, if the cops went looking for him, the O'Connors would know he was broke and desperate. They would go after the only leverage he had left, her 19-year-old sister. She couldn't risk Lily. She couldn't call the police. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gagged, leaning over to vomit pure bile onto the asphalt. The pain was putting her body into shock. She was going to pass out here in the alley, and no one would find her until morning. Then she remembered the weight in her apron pocket. With agonizing slowness, she used her good hand to unzip her trench coat, slipping her fingers into the canvas pocket of her diner apron. Her fingers closed around the thick, waterproof cardstock. "If the shadows you're looking for get too close, call. Roman." He was dangerous. He was a criminal. But right now, sitting in a pool of freezing water and her own blood, he was the only powerful person she knew who wasn't connected to Brad's mess. Her shaking, blood-stained thumb tapped the numbers from the card into her phone. It rang once, twice. "Speak." The voice was rough, irritated, and bordered by the heavy bass of club music in the background. "Roman," she wheezed, her voice barely a whisper over the sound of the rain. "It's Chloe." The background noise instantly vanished, replaced by the sound of a heavy door shutting. When he spoke again, the irritation was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. "Chloe, where are you? Can you pick me up?" she sobbed, the dam finally breaking. I'm behind the diner, in the alley. Please, are you hurt?" The tone of his voice shifted. The smooth, calm mob boss was gone. This was a predator catching the scent of blood. "My arm," she gasped, resting her head back against the muddy tire. "It's broken. He broke my arm, Roman. I can't call the police. He'll kill my sister." "Listen to me very carefully, Chloe." Roman's voice was eerily calm, but it vibrated with a terrifying, contained violence. "Do not move. Keep your eyes open. I am 3 minutes away." "Okay," she whispered. "Keep talking to me," he commanded. She heard the roar of an engine revving through the phone. "What did he break it with?" "His hands," she cried, the memory of the wet snap making her retch again. "He twisted it. Roman, it hurts so bad." "I know, Piccola. I know. Breathe for me." She focused on the sound of his breathing over the line, using it as an anchor to keep from slipping into unconsciousness. The headlights of passing cars at the end of the alley blurred into streaks of light. Exactly 3 minutes later, the screech of heavy tires drowned out the rain. A massive black Cadillac Escalade swerved violently into the narrow alley, its high beams blinding her. The vehicle didn't even come to a full stop before the doors flew open. "Roman," she whimpered, as a towering silhouette stepped into the headlights. He moved faster than a man his size should be able to. In a second, he was on his knees in the puddles beside her, his expensive wool coat dragging in the mud. He took one look at the unnatural angle of her arm, and she saw something flash in his dark eyes that made her breath hitch. Absolute, unadulterated murder. But when his hands touched her, they were impossibly gentle. "Don't look at it," he instructed softly, shifting his body to block her view of the mangled limb. He took off his heavy coat and draped it over her shivering shoulders. Tommy, his right-hand man, appeared beside him, holding a large black umbrella over them, shielding her from the driving rain. Tommy took one look at her arm and grimaced. "Jesus, boss." "Get the back seat down. Call Dr. Evans. Tell him to open the private clinic. Tell him he's doing an emergency set, and if he asks questions, I'll cut his tongue out." Roman snapped without looking away from her. "On it," Tommy said, retreating to the SUV. Roman leaned in close. He smelled like bergamot, expensive scotch, and rain. "I have to pick you up, Chloe. It's going to hurt." Chloe squeezed her eyes shut and nodded. "Just do it." He slid his right arm firmly under her knees and his left behind her back, taking extreme care not to brush against her left side. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. He lifted her. She screamed, burying her face into the crook of his neck as a fresh wave of agony tore through her. He held her tight against his chest, walking steadily toward the warmth of the SUV. "I've got you," he murmured into her wet hair, his voice vibrating against her cheek. "You're safe now. And whoever did this is a dead man." Consciousness returned not as a sudden awakening, but as a slow, muddy crawl out of a deep, drug-induced trench. The first thing she registered was the absence of the freezing Chicago rain. Instead, she was enveloped in a dry, perfectly climate-controlled warmth that smelled faintly of cedar and expensive, crisp laundry detergent. She tried to shift her weight, and a dull, throbbing ache flared in her left side, instantly grounding her in reality. The memories hit her like a physical blow. The dark alley, Brad's wild eyes, the sickening snap of her radius bone, and the terrifying, comforting presence of Roman Russo. Her eyes fluttered open. She wasn't in a sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital room at Rush University Medical Center like she expected. She was lying in a massive, king-sized bed, adorned with heavy silk sheets and immaculate white fret linens. The room was expansive, designed in sleek, modern shades of charcoal, slate, and brushed steel. Floor-to-ceiling windows made up the entire far wall, offering a breathtaking, dizzying view of Lake Michigan and the Navy Pier Ferris wheel, which looked tiny from this altitude. She was in a penthouse. Judging by the angle of the John Hancock Center, she was somewhere near the top of the St. Regis Chicago. "Don't try to sit up yet, Miss Bennett. The nerve block is still wearing off, and the Percocet needs another 20 minutes to fully kick in." She turned her head to the right. A man in his late 50s, with thinning grey hair and a neatly pressed dress shirt, was packing a leather medical bag. He had kind eyes, but the way he moved, efficient, silent, and completely devoid of bedside banter, spoke of a man used to working off the books. Who are you?" Her voice was raspy, her throat parched. "Dr. Arthur Evans," he replied, snapping the brass clasps of his bag shut. "Mr. Russo called me. I set the bone. It was a clean fracture, miraculously. No shattered fragments. You have a titanium plate and 6 screws holding the radius together, and a fiberglass cast that you will need to keep dry. You'll be in a sling for 6 weeks, minimum." She looked down. Her left arm, from the mid-bicep down to her knuckles, was encased in a sleek, black fiberglass cast, resting on a velvet pillow. "The police," she started, panic rising in her chest. "We're not involved." A deep, rumbling voice finished from the doorway. Roman stepped into the room. He had discarded the suit jacket and tie. He wore a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing a network of faded, violent scars and intricate dark ink that disappeared under the fabric. The sheer physical presence of him made the massive bedroom suddenly feel claustrophobic. Dr. Evans nodded respectfully. "She's stable, Roman. Keep her hydrated. I've left the prescriptions on the kitchen island. Call me if the swelling increases." "Thank you, Arthur. Tommy will see you out," Roman said, his eyes never leaving her face. Once the heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind the doctor, Roman walked over to the side of the bed. He pulled up a leather armchair and sat down, leaning his elbows on his knees. He looked exhausted, a dark shadow of stubble clinging to his jawline, but his eyes were sharp, predatory, and hyper-focused. "Drink," he commanded softly, holding a crystal glass of water with a glass straw to her lips. She took a slow sip, the cool water soothing her raw throat. "Thank you. Roman, I don't know how to repay you for this. The surgery, the doctor." "Stop," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You don't owe me anything, Chloe, but you are going to tell me exactly what happened in that alley, every single detail." She swallowed hard, looking away from his intense gaze. "It was Brad. My ex-boyfriend. I told you, he's in trouble." "You mentioned the O'Connors on the phone," Roman said, the name dropping from his lips like poison. "Liam O'Connor's crew. I don't know his first name. Brad just said the O'Connors from the West Side. He owes them $20,000. He came to the diner looking for money he thought I was hiding. When I tried to get away, he grabbed me. He wouldn't let go." A rogue tear slipped down her cheek, hot and humiliating. "He said if I called the cops, the O'Connors would find out through the police scanners. He said they'd go after my sister, Lily. She's a sophomore at DePaul University. She lives in the dorms there. I couldn't risk her, Roman. She's all I have." Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. When she finally looked back at Roman, the temperature in the room seemed to have dropped 10 degrees. His expression was a mask of cold, terrifying calculation. The gentle man who had carried her out of the rain was gone, replaced by the ruthless syndicate boss the whole city whispered about. 20,000, Roman repeated, his voice dangerously soft. He broke your arm over $20,000. It's a lot of money for people like us, she whispered. Roman stood up, pacing to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looking out over the sprawling city skyline. The O'Connors are bottom feeders. They run illegal sports books and loan-sharking operations out of dive bars in Pilsen. They are reckless, loud, and they lack discipline. But they are violent. If they threatened your sister, it wasn't an empty threat. Panic gripped her throat, suffocating her. She tried to push herself up with her good arm. I have to get to Lily. I have to warn her. Chloe, sit down, Roman ordered, turning back to her, his voice returning to that soothing rumble. He crossed the room in 2 strides, placing a warm, heavy hand on her right shoulder to keep her grounded against the pillows. Your sister is perfectly safe. How do you know? Because the moment Tommy put you in the back of my SUV last night, I made a phone call. I have 4 of my best men stationed at DePaul, 2 inside her dormitory building, 2 outside. They have her class schedule, her photo, and strict orders to put a bullet between the eyes of anyone who looks at her sideways. She doesn't know they are there, and she won't. She can go to her classes, go to the cafeteria, live her life, but she is untouchable. She stared at him, her mouth slightly open, the sheer magnitude of his power washing over her. You did that? For me? He leaned down, his face mere inches from hers. The scent of bergamot and danger surrounded her. I protect what is mine, Chloe. You belong in my diner, pouring my coffee. No one touches you. No one threatens your family. Brad made a fatal miscalculation. Roman, please, don't kill him, she pleaded, the reality of the Mafia world crashing down on her sheltered life. He's pathetic and stupid, but if you kill him, you'll go to prison, or the O'Connors will start a war. Roman's lips curved into a dark, humorless smile. Oh, Piccola. I don't start wars over $20,000. I end them. And as for Brad, death is far too easy a consequence for what he did to you. He straightened up, adjusting his cuffs. You are going to stay here. My housekeeper, Maria, will bring you food. My men are stationed at the elevators and the stairwells. Do not attempt to leave. Do not answer your phone. Let me handle the garbage. Before she could protest, before she could ask him what he was planning, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone in the gilded cage of his penthouse, surrounded by luxury, yet utterly terrified of the storm he was about to unleash. For the next 48 hours, her world was reduced to the 4 walls of Roman's opulent guest suite. Maria, an older, fiercely protective Italian woman who spoke minimal English but communicated perfectly through plates of homemade lasagna and fresh cannoli, attended to her every need. Her arm throbbed relentlessly, a constant reminder of the alley. But the fear for Lily had subsided. Roman had shown her a live video feed on an iPad of her walking out of the DePaul library, flanked seamlessly by 2 men in unassuming dark jackets. She was smiling, completely oblivious to the invisible shield around her. Roman, however, was a ghost. He would appear late at night, long after the city lights had reached their peak, smelling of cigar smoke and the cold night air. He would sit in the armchair in her room, quietly asking about her pain levels, ensuring Maria was feeding her enough, and then he would vanish back into his study, where the muffled sounds of heated phone calls and heavy footsteps echoed through the penthouse. On the evening of the 3rd day, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. It felt like the air before a lightning strike, charged, heavy, and metallic. She was sitting on the plush velvet sofa in the main living area, her cast propped up on a pillow, attempting to read one of her nursing textbooks with one hand. The private elevator doors dinged, and Tommy strode in. His usually relaxed demeanor was gone. His jaw was tight, and there was a dark bruise forming on his left cheekbone. Roman stepped out of his office, rolling down the sleeves of his shirt. He took one look at Tommy and stopped dead. "Report." "We found him, boss," Tommy said, his voice grim. He glanced at her, hesitating. "You want me to do this in the office?" "No, Chloe is involved. She hears it," Roman commanded, walking over to the wet bar and pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. "Where was he?" "Holed up in a roach motel out in Gary, Indiana, trying to lay low. He was spun out of his mind on meth, completely paranoid," Tommy explained, stepping further into the room. "Silas and the boys secured him. He put up a fight, hence the face, but he's currently restrained in the basement of the meat-packing facility on the south side." Her stomach churned at the word restrained. "What did he say, Tommy?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Tommy looked at Roman for permission. Roman gave a single curt nod, taking a sip of his drink. "He squealed the second we applied a little pressure," Tommy said, choosing his words carefully. "But boss, there's a problem. It wasn't just about the 20 grand. Roman froze, his dark eyes locking onto his lieutenant. "Explain." "Brad didn't just go to Chloe for her savings," Tommy continued, running a hand through his short hair. "He told the O'Connors he couldn't get the cash. Liam O'Connor told him that if he couldn't pay in green, he had to pay in flesh. Brad told Liam about Chloe. He told Liam that Chloe was a pretty young waitress, working the graveyard shift with no family to protect her, except a college sister." She felt the blood drain from her face. The room started to spin. "Brad didn't go to the alley to rob her, Roman," Tommy said, the disgust evident in his tone. "He went to grab her. He was going to hand Chloe over to the O'Connors to clear his debt. Liam runs an underground trafficking ring through his massage parlors on the west side. That's why he broke her arm. She fought back, and he lost his grip when she wouldn't get in his car. He panicked and ran." The textbook slipped from her lap, hitting the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. She couldn't breathe. Her ex-boyfriend, the man she had lived with for 2 years, the man she had loved, hadn't just tried to mug her. He had tried to sell her into human trafficking to save his own miserable life. The sickening snap in the alley suddenly felt like a mercy. If he hadn't broken her arm, if the pain hadn't made her scream and drop dead weight, she might be in a windowless room on the west side right now. Glass shattered violently. She jumped, clutching her chest. Roman had crushed the heavy crystal tumbler in his bare hand. Whiskey and blood dripped from his clenched fist onto the pristine Persian rug, but he didn't seem to notice the glass embedded in his palm. "Boss," Tommy warned, stepping forward. Roman raised a hand, stopping him. He looked at her, and the raw, unhinged fury in his eyes terrified her more than Brad ever could. He wasn't just angry, he was a natural disaster waiting to be unleashed. "Liam O'Connor ordered this," Roman whispered to himself, the sound deadlier than a scream. "Liam O'Connor put a price on her head." "Roman, your hand," she gasped, her nursing instincts briefly overriding her shock. He ignored her, turning his deadly gaze back to Tommy. "Where is Liam right now?" "He's operating out of the VIP room at the Shamrock, that dive bar he owns on Cermak Road. He has about 10 guys with him. They're heavily armed, boss. Word on the street is they know you picked Chloe up. One of their lookouts saw the Escalade in the diner alley. They know we have her. Liam is bracing for a hit." "Good," Roman said softly, wrapping a black handkerchief tightly around his bleeding hand. "Let them brace." "Roman, no!" She stood up, swaying slightly. "You can't start a gang war over me. If you go in there, people will die. You could die. Please just hand Brad over to the police. Let them deal with the trafficking ring." Roman walked toward her. He didn't stop until he was standing inches away, his towering frame casting a long shadow over her. He reached out with his uninjured hand, his fingers gently, almost reverently, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The contrast between the violence he was planning and the absolute tenderness of his touch made her breath hitch. "The police are bought and paid for by the O'Connors, Chloe. You know this," he murmured, his thumb tracing her jawline. "If I hand Brad over, he's out on bail in 2 hours, and Liam sends someone more competent to finish the job. He dared to put a price on what belongs to me. He brought his filth to my doorstep." "I don't belong to anyone," she whispered, though her body betrayed her, leaning into his warmth. "You do now," he stated, a dark promise in his eyes. "You called me to pick you up, Chloe. You invited me in. I am pulling you out of the wreckage, and I will incinerate anyone who tries to drag you back down." He pulled away, instantly transforming back into the untouchable boss. "Tommy, call Silas. Tell him to assemble the strike team. Suppressed weapons only. I want the perimeter of the Shamrock locked down by midnight. No one goes in, and absolutely no one from O'Connor's crew comes out breathing." "You're going yourself?" Tommy asked, surprised. Roman looked at his bloody, bandaged hand, a grim, terrifying smile touching his lips. "Liam O'Connor wanted a piece of flesh. I'm going to deliver it to him personally." He turned on his heel and strode toward the elevator. The doors slid open, and he looked back at her one last time, standing in the opulent living room, a broken girl wrapped in a world of billionaires and blood. "Lock the doors, Maria," Roman called out. "Do not let anyone up." The elevator doors closed, sealing her in the penthouse and leaving her to wait in the agonizing silence while the man who had become her protector went to war for her life. The silence in the penthouse after the elevator doors closed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. It pressed against her eardrums, a stark contrast to the violent storm of revelations that had just upended her entire existence. She stood frozen in the center of the vast, immaculate living room, her broken arm throbbing in time with her racing heart. Maria, the housekeeper, quietly emerged from the kitchen, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. She took one look at Chloe's pale face, walked over, and gently guided her back to the velvet sofa. She murmured something soothing in Italian, placing a warm cup of chamomile tea on the glass coffee table. But she couldn't bring herself to drink it. Her eyes fell on the sleek, black iPad Tommy had hastily discarded on the armchair before they left. A dangerous curiosity gripped her. Roman had used that tablet to show her the live feed of Lily at her university. If Tommy had been using it for tactical oversight, it was entirely possible the encrypted communication channels were still active. Using her good hand, she reached over and pulled the device onto her lap. The screen lit up. It wasn't locked. Instead, it displayed a highly detailed, localized map of Cermak Road, dotted with pulsing red and blue GPS markers. In the corner of the screen, a small audio icon was broadcasting a live, encrypted radio feed. She tapped the volume button, turning it up just enough to hear the low, static-laced voices of Roman's strike team. "Perimeter is locked. Silas, you have the back alley?" Tommy's voice crackled through the speaker, tight and professional. "Back door is reinforced steel. Planting the breaching charge now." A deep, unfamiliar voice. Silas replied, "We have 3 lookouts on the roof. They're neutralized. The O'Connors are getting sloppy, boss. They're all drinking in the VIP lounge." Then, Roman's voice cut through the static. It was devoid of any emotion, cold and hollow, like a machine built for execution. Cut the primary power grid for the block. We do this in the dark. Put your night vision on. Suppressors only. I want Liam alive until I get to him. Execute. Her breath hitched. She squeezed her eyes shut, clutching the edge of the tablet. Over the radio, there was a sudden, sharp electronic whine, followed by Silas's voice. Power is down. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. A muffled thump vibrated through the audio feed, followed by the terrifying, chaotic symphony of a professional raid. She could hear the rapid, muffled puff of suppressed automatic weapons. There were shouts of panic, the shattering of glass, and the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floorboards. The O'Connor crew, drunk and caught completely off guard in the pitch black, didn't stand a chance against Roman's highly trained syndicate. Main floor clear. 4 hostiles down, Tommy reported breathlessly, moving to the VIP room. Stack up, Roman ordered. There was a heavy crash as a door was kicked off its hinges. For a moment, the radio was filled with chaotic shouting, followed by a localized burst of unsuppressed gunfire that made her flinch violently on the sofa. Someone had fired a shotgun. Silas is hit. Vest caught it. He's good, Tommy yelled over the comms. More suppressed fire. Then, an eerie, terrifying silence settled over the channel. Clear, Roman said, his voice closer to the microphone now. Turn the emergency lights on. Tie him to the chair. She leaned closer to the iPad, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She heard the sound of zip ties ratcheting tight, followed by a wet, coughing groan. Roman Russo. A thick, blood-choked Irish accent spat through the feed. Liam O'Connor. You're crossing a line, Russo. The Commission won't stand for this. You're raiding my territory over a piece of trash like Brad Jenkins. Are you insane? Brad Jenkins is currently locked in a freezer on the south side, praying for death, Roman replied. The sound of his dress shoes pacing the wooden floor of the bar echoed ominously. This isn't about the 20,000 he owes you, Liam. It's about how he intended to pay it. He said he had a girl, Liam yelled, desperation bleeding into his bravado. He said she was prime inventory. I didn't know she was yours. I swear to God, Russo, if I had known you claimed the Waitress, I would have put a bullet in Jenkins myself. You put a price on her head, Roman said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. You sent your filth out into my city, looking to drag her into your pathetic, disgusting trafficking ring. She was walking to her car, Liam. She was just trying to go home. I have money. I have roots, Liam begged, the reality of his impending death finally breaking his composure. Look, Russo, I have a ledger. Every dirty cop in the 7th Precinct, including Detective Sullivan. I'll give you Sullivan. I'll give you my entire West Side operation. Just let me walk out of here. I don't want your money, Liam. I don't want your roots. And I already own the 7th Precinct, Roman said softly. There was a sickening, visceral sound, the sharp, metallic ring of a blade being drawn from a scabbard. Wait, what are you doing? Russo, please! Liam shrieked, the sound tearing through the iPad speakers and filling the opulent penthouse with the raw audio of pure terror. She has a titanium plate and 6 screws in her arm because of your debt, Liam, Roman stated, devoid of mercy. You owe me a pound of flesh. I'm collecting. No! She blindly slammed her hand onto the power button of the iPad, instantly cutting the feed. The screen went black, plunging the living room back into silence. Her chest heaved as she gasped for air, tears streaming down her face. She pulled her knees to her chest, careful of her cast, and buried her face in her good hand. Roman wasn't just a businessman. He was a monster. But as she sat there, trembling in the aftermath of the audio feed, a terrifying, dark realization washed over her. He was her monster. He had just dismantled an entire criminal faction, slaughtered a trafficker, and gone to war against the West Side for one simple, undeniable reason. She had called him, and he had promised to pick her up. The sun was just beginning to cast a pale, bruised purple light over Lake Michigan when the private elevator chimed. She hadn't slept. She hadn't moved from the velvet sofa. The chamomile tea had gone ice-cold hours ago. She stared at the brushed steel doors as they slid open. Roman stepped out. He looked like he had walked through hell. His bespoke charcoal suit was ruined, torn at the shoulder, and heavily stained with dark, drying blood. His tie was gone, and his black dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. His knuckles were bruised and split open, and a shallow, jagged cut ran along his left cheekbone, still sluggishly bleeding. The scent that rolled off him was a harsh, metallic mixture of cordite, copper, and sweat. He stopped when he saw her sitting in the dim light of the living room. The predatory tension in his shoulders instantly dropped. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline of the raid finally leaving his system. "Maria should have put you to bed," he said roughly, his voice completely raw. "I couldn't sleep," she whispered. She stood up slowly, the dull ache in her arm completely overshadowed by the overwhelming presence of the man standing in front of her. I listened, Roman. To the iPad. Roman's dark eyes flicked to the black tablet resting on the coffee table. His jaw tightened, but he didn't look angry. He just looked resigned. "You shouldn't have heard that, Chloe. The violence. It isn't meant for you." "It was for me," she corrected him, taking a tentative step forward. "Liam, the O'Connors. They're gone. The shamrock burned to the ground 20 minutes ago," Roman confirmed flatly. "An unfortunate electrical fire. The bodies inside won't be identified for weeks. The West Side trafficking ring is permanently closed." She closed the distance between them, stopping just a foot away from him. He was so tall, so imposing, yet right now he looked entirely vulnerable. She reached out with her uninjured right hand, her fingertips trembling as she gently touched the unbruised side of his face. His skin was cold. "You went to war for a waitress," she murmured, staring up into his dark, endlessly deep eyes. Roman leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. He let out a long, shuddering breath, his hands coming up to lightly grip her waist, avoiding her cast with practiced precision. "You were never just a waitress to me, Piccola. From the first night I walked into that diner, and you told me to mind the wet floor with a glare that could cut glass. I knew. I just didn't want to pull you into the dark. I wanted you in the light. But Brad dragged you down, and I had to come get you." "What happened to Brad?" she asked, the name feeling like ash on her tongue. Roman pulled back slightly, his eyes hardening into flint. "He's alive. Barely. Killing him would have been a mercy he hasn't earned." Silas loaded him onto a rusted commercial fishing trawler, bound for the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska. "The captain is an old associate of mine. Brad will spend the next 10 years gutting fish in sub-zero temperatures to pay off his debt to me. If he stops working, they throw him overboard. You will never, ever see him again." A profound, staggering wave of relief washed over her. Brad was gone. The O'Connors were ashes. Lily was safe in her dorm, completely unaware of the blood that had been spilled to protect her. "You're bleeding," she whispered, looking at the cut on his cheek. Her nursing instincts flared, a comforting anchor in a sea of madness. "Sit down. Let me clean it." Roman let out a low, exhausted chuckle, allowing her to guide him to the sofa. He sat heavily, resting his elbows on his knees while she went to the guest bathroom to retrieve the first aid kit Dr. Evans had left behind. When she returned, she sat beside him. Using only her right hand, she clumsily soaked a cotton pad in antiseptic. "This is going to sting. I've had worse," he murmured, his eyes tracking her every movement. She gently dabbed the cut on his cheekbone. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached up, his large, scarred hand wrapping around her wrist, just like he had in the diner, but this time there was no hesitation. He pulled her hand away from his face and pressed his lips to the inside of her wrist, right over her racing pulse. "The life you had, Chloe. It's gone," Roman said softly, his breath warm against her skin. "You can't go back to the diner. You can't go back to the studio apartment. Liam's remaining loyalists, the other families in Chicago, they all know about you now. They know you are the one weakness I have. The only way I can keep you safe is if you stay with me. Permanently." She looked at him, truly looked at him, at the blood on his shirt, the scars on his knuckles, and the absolute, unyielding devotion burning in his gaze. She thought about the struggle, the poverty, the constant, suffocating fear of the past 2 years, and then she looked around the penthouse, this gilded fortress where she was protected by a king who would burn down the city to keep her warm. "I don't have anywhere else to go, Roman," she said softly, dropping the antiseptic pad. "And even if I did, I wouldn't want to." Roman's eyes flared. He reached up, sliding his hand to the back of her neck, his fingers threading through her hair. "Say it, Chloe. Tell me you understand what this means. There is no walking away. Not tomorrow. Not in 10 years. You are mine." "I understand," she breathed, leaning into his touch. "I'm yours." He didn't hesitate. He pulled her into a fierce, consuming kiss. It tasted of whiskey, adrenaline, and absolute possession. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a seal on a contract, a vow written in blood and ash. The pain in her arm faded into insignificance as he pulled her closer against his uninjured side, wrapping her in the suffocating, terrifying, beautiful safety of his world. The storm outside finally broke, the morning sun piercing through the clouds over Chicago. But inside the penthouse, a different kind of storm had just been quelled, anchoring her forever to the most dangerous man in the city. That rainy night in the alley shattered more than just the bones in her arm. It shattered the fragile, mundane illusion of the life she thought she was meant to live. Brad's betrayal and the brutal violence of the O'Connors forced her hand, pushing her into the waiting, blood-stained embrace of Roman Russo. She lost her freedom to walk the streets as an anonymous nursing student, but in return, she gained a kingdom. She traded the grease-stained apron of a midnight diner for silk, steel, and the untouchable status of a syndicate queen. The scars remain, both the titanium plate in her wrist and the memories of Cermak Road, but they are a constant reminder of the price of survival. When the shadows of Chicago closed in to devour her, she didn't become a victim. She called the devil, and he answered, raising her up to reign by his side in the dark.